Hi guys.
Hello. Happy Friday.
Okay. So we're just sharing a video and then we'll be ready. Here we go. Come on. There we go. Alrighty.
Ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Very nice. Okay, so we're in day 4 of our 5 days of values, and then day 9 of our overall 15 days towards peace and purpose. Today we're talking about how do you commit to living your values. So far we've talked about what values are, how do we know what our values are, how do we navigate our emotions and inner conflicts around values, and now we're kind of getting into actually like living our values. So if, once we are clear on the things that are of value to us, if we're going to live them, we need to start making choices based on those values. And once we start to steer our life based on these values and make choices around them, it then means that we've got to take action based on those choices. And what this starts to build in us is more of our faculty of will, the will being our ability to make choice, right? And not just make the choice, but follow the choice through. And for a lot of us, our faculty of will isn't particularly hugely developed, and this is part of also us being kind of socialized, because we're within a lot of social structures, within our families and schooling and then work, we get given a lot of structure. And so learning how to actually self-generate that structure through applying our will and making choices is then something that kind of takes time. It takes practice, and it's what's important to be aware of as part of that is that we need to kind of make choices that we're ready to make. If we make a choice that is beyond kind of our readiness, we're going to more likely collapse in some form and not be able to follow through with that choice. So as soon as we make some kind of choice, whatever it is, I decide that I have a value around kind of helping people, and I make a choice that the best way that I think I can help people is I'm gonna become a doctor, and all of a sudden I'm going through crazy amounts of study or whatever it is, and or just even the beginning of that choice, or once I make up my mind to do that, all of a sudden, just psychically, I'm gonna start having a big kind of gap between where I'm at now and what I'm going to need to do to actually actualize that choice. And that gap creates a lot of dissonance. It creates a lot of high kind of sensation in our bodies of, whoa, hang on, I got to get myself in a, shift all the things inside of myself that lets me be able to start to enter into the person that is going to be doing all of those things. And learning how to actually kind of metabolize dissonance and be with dissonance is a really important part of developing our wills, and understanding the process of it. As soon as we make a choice, even let's say you decide that you're going to get up extra early tomorrow, I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. If you make that choice and you make it for real, I'm going to do the thing, I can feel my whole system kind of okay, hopefully we're still going. And so not kind of collapsing under dissonance is a really important part of knowing how to use our wills effectively. And a lot of that is to do with grounding. If you go back to our down regulation practices, and just like really putting our attention down into the earth so that we can be with that intensity of sensation. So like learning how to actually engage our wills, what, in a way, this is kind of about integrity. I think of integrity as I do what I say I'm going to do, and so developing personal integrity, is then a really important part of actually starting to live our values, and then of course we can say, well, if I'm living my values, that's kind of an important aspect of integrity as well. And what the final piece, and then I'll pause, that I want to kind of add around will is that it's really important that we're aware of when we make promises to ourselves, and that we, as best we possibly can, we keep those promises to ourselves. And because if we do that, we start to build our integrity and we start to build our power. As soon as I know that I'm going to keep a promise to myself, I start to trust myself in a whole different kind of way. And that's power right there, but it's important that you go gradual, right? Because I don't want to make a promise to myself that it's going to be super hard for me to actually meet, or if I'm going to do that, I want to be really super real about what I'm getting myself into. So generally it's best to start small and to only make promises that you're sure you're going to keep, so that you actually really start to trust your word, and the power of your word actually starts to grow a whole lot more, and then your personal power starts to grow. So kind of taking the gradual steps to build your personal power around your integrity is really important. And in a way, you kind of just want to practice making choices. And it can be even little silly choices to start with. I'm like, I'm going to leave 10 minutes earlier. I'm going to leave at this exact time. Or I'm going to take 10 minutes just to stack these cushions in one particular way. Or I'm going to stand on my chair for 7 minutes and 37 seconds. Whatever it is, it's just like some way of you engaging yourself in being able to keep your word with yourself. Okay, let me pause here and see how this lands for you.
Yeah, I love this topic. A couple of things that are buzz pieces that stand out that I'd love to just add a little to is, so we hear lots about secure attachment, and what is it to be the securely attached one for ourselves? What is it to be the person that we can count on to be consistent? And so much of the work that I do with clients as a parts work therapist is actually becoming the securely attached adult for our parts, for us, for who we are. And so basically, what does that mean? And it means what you're saying. It means, so a securely attached individual is somebody who is in integrity, who does what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, or who renegotiates in a relational way when they know that they're not going to be able to do it anymore. That creates safety. So it's not about being a superhero. It's not about always having to achieve everything that we say we're going to do. Actually, that could be then moving out of being in self-space and being in performance and perfectionism. So actually, to be relational with ourselves is to be in reality around, I committed to this thing, it's not true for me anymore, or I actually overcommitted here, or whatever that renegotiation opening starts to look like, but it's staying in reality about that, and then being relational with ourselves and others if we need to be, if we've created expectations around us, so that we show up in a secure way. But it starts with showing up here in a secure way by being dependable for ourselves. Now, part of what you said, the reason why we don't trust ourselves is because we don't do what we say we want to do, or we don't live into that which truly lights us up, even though we know what lights us up, or even though we know what has us feel good. So I love that you said here is really the piece around being rational around what your capacity is, and actually to preference starting smaller so that you can build that muscle of I've got this. And I've certainly been a culprit of committing to too much. My goodness, have I? And then actually it's like the cost is higher, because now not only, now I don't trust myself, right? Now there's this story that I'm not going to do it, or here I go again, this is another thing that I said I do that I'm not doing, or I just blank out to it because I don't want to feel those things. So really starting with a bite-sized, manageable commitment is like key to building that muscle of self-esteem. This is so related to our self-esteem. And people who have good self-esteem, watch, they keep their commitments or they renegotiate them, because that's where self-esteem comes from. It's a verb. I esteem myself by being pleased with. My esteem is I feel pleased about who I am being. I feel pleased about how I am showing up in the world. That is about my actions. So starting bite-sized, renegotiating, being that securely attached person for ourselves is like so much of the work. And the last thing I want to say is that when we commit to something, it's pretty normal that there might be parts of us that don't agree, that don't want that feel scared about that have those parts of us feel uncomfortable. You can kind of expect that may be the case, and that's why you haven't done it already. So again, being relational, being securely attached with ourselves means being in relationship, being connected to those voices inside, or those thoughts, or those feelings or sensations, and listening to them. And I'd go a step further and dialoguing with them. And if that seems a bit outlandish, just acknowledging them. So that might look something or sound something like this. It makes sense that I feel nervous about committing to getting up 20 minutes earlier every morning. Makes sense that I feel that way because I really value sleeping in. However, I also really value my health, and I'm going to be exercising in the mornings. It makes sense right now that I feel nervous about that. So that's like a very kind of abridged version of just having a very short dialogue with yourself. But know that dissonance is where creativity comes from. It's where power comes from. Like if we can lean into that dissonance, which is leaning into where our parts have an aversion to something and be in relationship with it, that's where our power lies.
Beautiful. I think the last thing that I want to add is that, like, we had someone ask us, well, what if I pick a value and then I don't kind of know if it's like the right value?
Yes.
Or another version of that might be, well, what does it look like for me to enact that value? Like the example I gave before, I'm like helping someone, I'm going to be a doctor. Well, I might actually try and go down that path, and then I realize, holy shit, all this study is like not for me, and I don't like blood, and like that's actually not the best way for me to help people. And I think, like that as an example is probably actually pretty common. We don't necessarily know in advance. Like that's a big part of being human, right? We got to kind of fuck our way through things. So, and that's I think a really important part of journeying the kind of commitment to our values as well is trying things. We make a choice. Ideally we make choices that kind of we let us learn in smaller ways. So kind of just advocating for little choices along the way.
Like
I think
an iterative process.
Iterative process, and I'm an agile guy, right? Is kind of then how we're going to gradually keep, let's say, improving our compass, right? Like values is like our compass. It's how we steer our lives by. So we've got to try stuff, and as we try stuff, we update our values. Hang on, helping people, actually a key way I want to do that is just being a warm presence around people. And okay, that's going to be part of how I operationalize this value that I have around helping people. And this, I think, gets a little bit into the territory too of setting goals based on our values, and we'll get more into that into kind of the last 5 days of this series.
The getting shit done chapter.
But just the one thing I want to say here is that I think there's a danger of setting goals and then almost losing sight of the value that we have around that goal. Like, let me go back to this doctor example. I set a goal to become a doctor, and I get so consumed by all the study and so on, I kind of forget, why did I make that choice in the first place? And this is then where our goals we can kind of get lost in the destination and lose sight of the journey, right? Because like maybe I do decide to go and study and be a doctor, but actually I can still enact my value of helping people all through that process. I can help my fellow students as part of informed study groups, and I can still be that warm presence. And this to me is the beauty of focusing on values before goals, is it lets us really appreciate the journey and actually live our values all the way through, even as our values might be giving us particular directions that we're setting larger goals around.
Yeah. I think it's I love what you just said just then, and it's to not be hard on ourselves if like the way that we intended to enact that value starts to change shape, and it's a fine line, right? There's a dance, it's an elegant dance between being in integrity, like keeping our commitments, listening to that little voice that says this is actually the next right thing, and knowing, is that true, or is that me, like am I being led by some part of me that's in avoidance? There is no one can tell you, right? And so this is part of the messiness of being human, and I think that it's valid to consider not doing something anymore if it's not lighting you up, and at the same time following our values isn't easy. So right, there's this, it's good when there's a paradox, and there's paradox here, right? So that's his life. So there's a practice that we put in the comments 2 days ago, and it was a values practice to start to open kind of your inspo around like, what are my values? Like, if I could have it any way, what would it be? Like, if I really let myself dream here, what is that? And then someone wrote to us and said, I did the practice, it was really great, I absolutely loved it, and now I'm kind of sitting with, whoa, like this is big, for me to really live into this. And so bite-sized steps, there's no rush. If you feel like there's a rush, slow down. If you feel like there's an emergency, pause, because I would in most cases say that there isn't an emergency. And it's awesome to move with pizzazz and checking that all of you is on board, checking, do I feel spacious around this? Am I in reality about this? What are the consequences of this? Like, going slow with all of that's really important. That's part of being a securely attached grown-up for ourselves, right? So bite-sized steps, stay self-connected, listen to what's happening inside as you make those steps, be realistic with yourself, renegotiate if you need to, forgive yourself if you need to renegotiate. That's part of the process, and actually it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing because it's iterative, and we actually make better choices as we renegotiate. Yeah.
Great. I think that's great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for writing comments, and yeah, happy to be here with you guys. And we'll pop a practice in the comments section, as we have been for each of these days, and let us know how you go with it. We're gonna have dinner, and then we'll be putting it up, so it'll be in about an hour. All right, guys, thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.